Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Welcome back, folks. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, means only one thing. It's Gaelic Life's roundup of how things have went in the club championships around Ulster. Thankfully, I'm joined this morning by Pete McGrath Jr. Down, got underway. Thanks very much for coming on to the podcast, Pete. So hopefully we'll hear all the action. I suppose there's only one place really to start. This Drumgath's won over Mayo Bridge, 14 points to 110. It jumps out off the results page. So what's the story? Big result for Drumgath.
Yeah, it's a huge result. Drumgath, pardon me, relegated this year, Mal, to Division 3 on the last day of the season. They really didn't perform at all against Longstone in that league game, which was the winner of that stayed up, the loser went down. And after that game, there was a change of management in the Drumgath setup, and MD McPolan took charge for their championship opener there against Mayo Bridge, which was played yesterday. A game where probably you'd have to look at it and say Mayo Bridge came into it possibly a little bit complacent. Game started quite nip and tuck. Drumgath got their foot in the door. Then Mayo Bridge seemed to take control. They were unlucky not to get a couple of goals. They hit the post, they hit the crossbar on two separate attacks, and still managed to go 1-6 to 2 up. Keelan Gallagher sort of hit a bit of form, scored a goal in 5 points within about 3 minutes. He kicked a goal, two 2-pointers and a 1-pointer. And at that stage, you would have feared for Drumgath. They were 6 behind at half time, but in the second half, they were playing with the breeze, and they really, really made use of that. They have a really nice balance to their team, but particularly pushed on this year by a couple of the younger players coming through. Owen Travers, Darren McAleenan, two lads just out of minor last year, and both have had injuries at different times this season as well, which may have contributed to their league form or lack of. But both had really strong games yesterday. Packy Downey still a very, very important pivot in the attack for them. He ended up kicking the winner with about 3 or 4 minutes to go in the game. And in the middle of the field, they have a strong pull as well. Colin McGinn, an experienced campaigner. Pierce McPolan was on the down panel last season for most of the year. So two really good players in the middle as well, which gives them a pull in there. They've got lively scoring forwards in Shea Byrne, Shea McConville, Ryan Byrne coming forward from the half back line. So they have a really good balance. And they're not a team that should be underestimated, but there's no doubt that Mayo Bridge maybe took them a little bit for granted yesterday. And probably if you were previewing the games this time last week, that's the one you would have least expected there to be a shock in, because it was a local derby. You would have thought there's no way Mayo Bridge will allow themselves to slip into this trap. But Drumgath were there. They were competitive throughout, and over the hour, you'd have to say that this was not a smash and grab win. This was a deserved win in the balance of play. So Drumgath, they've guaranteed themselves senior championship status for next year now already with that win. Huge point for them, and it's their first ever win in senior championship football as well. So absolutely monumental day for the club.
You talked about a change of management, and that nearly always gets a bounce in a lot of sports. But has anything changed from what they did on the game, or was it just a collection of things? Because you touched on the fact that like relegation is not an easy card to carry, so something definitely changed.
I think probably in light of their performance against Longstone, for so much of that game they were so poor that this was almost a redemption match for them. It wasn't just losing to Longstone. I mean, they ended up losing that game by 8 points, but with about 10 minutes to go, the score was something along the lines of 218 to 1-6. So it was an absolute trouncing, a hammering match.
It was the manner of it.
It was the manner of it, and throughout that game, Drumgath were playing completely individually. Nobody was really working for each other. A man was tackling, there was nobody coming to help him. A man going forward had no support run. And you look at yesterday's performance, and it's the complete contrast of that. When they're attacking, they've got runners, they've got options. When they're defending, they're crowding out Mayo Bridge men. If they make a mistake defensively, there's 3-4 other men trying to make up for the man who made the error. And it's those elements of the performance that really came together to push them over the line. That hunger, that desire, way below anything kind of tactical or technical. It's those base elements of performance in Gaelic football that never change, and those are what pushed Drumgath yesterday. Those are the areas where they superseded Mayo Bridge by such a big degree yesterday, and ultimately that's, to me, what contributed to their victory.
Finally, on Drumgath, when did you get the sense that the upset was in the cards? Because sometimes you go to a game and it's maybe you don't know until the end. Was there signs early on that this was going to be different?
The game was tight early on, but there's probably been quite a lot of the games that have been tight at different stages that ended up where the favourite goes on to win convincingly. I think where you probably where I certainly sensed it was in the first 10, 12 minutes of the second half. Mayo Bridge went in 6 up. Drumgath were coming out playing with a bit of a breeze, but there's still this temptation to think team that stayed up in Division 1 versus team that was relegated in Division 2, the experience, the know-how, Mayo Bridge will manage their way through this. But Drumgath came out, they took the game by the scruff of the neck at that first part of the second half. They got the scores, they worked themselves into the game, they managed to pull themselves level, fell a point behind again, still came back into the game. And as soon as they had that stranglehold in the second half, it was obvious they weren't going to let go and it was going to go right to the wire.
And I suppose the other side of the coin, Mayo Bridge, at this stage, Pete, they don't know who they play in the draw, but the obvious answer to the question is they bounce back. But where do they go from here? Or can they see it as a blip, or is there something more worrying for them in it?
I think Mayo Bridge have to take a lesson from Drumgath themselves, because where they are now is probably where Drumgath were 2 weeks ago after the league relegation. They'll be waking up this morning wondering what happened, what went wrong, how did it go so badly wrong, how did we manage to fall into all the traps we said we weren't going to. They just simply have to dust themselves down, get back out in the field probably tomorrow night, Wednesday night, and say, right, we just have to refocus now. By that stage, they'll know who their opponent is, try and get a win, try and start to harness some momentum. I mean, Mayo Bridge had a disappointing exit to the championship a couple of years ago. They lost to Glen, who were Division 3 at that time. They'd been promoted all right, but they were in Division 3. So, a big championship defeat or a surprise championship defeat, unfortunately for Mayo Bridge, isn't something completely unique or new in the last couple of years. What I would say is probably new is that they've a lot involved this year from their minor winning championship teams of the last 2 years. Now, that was the same team because that was the time that the age grade changed from under 17 to under 18.
Mhm.
So that team got 2 runs at it, but they won both championships. And I think there is probably quite a lot of expectation in Mayo Bridge already on that young group. But it's going to take them time to, as it did in the league this year, it took them time to find their feet at senior league football. Senior championship football is another level up again. And it's going to take them time to sort of cut themselves in there and learn the ropes a little bit. So it'll be a rude awakening for a lot of them yesterday's game. But how much they learn from that will dictate how they can respond and react over the remaining course of the championship.
As you say, it does. I think in a lot of cases, not just Mayo Bridge. I think a lot of clubs fall into the trap of a really good minor team and they expect them to kick into action right away. But for people listening in who aren't from down, it's a backdoor situation where the all 8 losers goes into the pot. So that's going to be made tonight after Kilcoo and Brainsford. The other one that jumps out probably because it went to extra time was Glen and Ballyholland. I think it was Thursday or Friday night. It
It
kicked
was
it off, did it?
It was Thursday night. It was the championship opener, yeah. And again, a decent game of football. The last 15 minutes was probably of normal time was probably the most exciting period in the game. It was again a fairly tentative opening. Both sides sort of feeling each other out, and again an element of a local derby in that one. Ballyholland then managed to assert some authority on the game. They went 13-6, I think it was up. Certainly were 6 points, if not 7 ahead in the second half. Glen got a couple of scores, and then Ballyholland were reduced to 14 men. And in the current game with the new rules, losing a man is so significant. Going down, and then defensively, you still have to keep your 3 up, so you're 1 light in that defensive screen, which potentially gives the opposition the chance to create massive scoring opportunities. Glen did kick on during that period and they actually got themselves ahead. They went 18-16 up in injury time, and Ballyholland managed to come back from that with a 2-pointer from Jack Murder, a really, really good score to push the game to extra time. But in extra time, again, the extra man, and probably at that stage, the wee bit more that Glen had in the legs told. Shane Miller came on in the game and did very well. Paddy Brooks had a strong game at times. Niall McParlin was strong around the middle of the field. These are all players who are either on county panels or have been on county panels in recent years. Jack McCartan's another one. So Glen have got good players there. They've got a good core to their team. They have been in the last 2 Down Championship semi-finals, having played in Division 3 and Division 2 in each of those years. Or Division 2 and Division 3, the other way around. And they're a good side. They've got a strong core. Ballyholland, I think they'll be able to take heart from the defeat. They were relegated from Division 1. So it'll certainly there'll be positives for them going into the losers pot. But that is a losers pot that's going to be loaded with some significant challenges in there, because you're going to have Mayo Bridge in there, Ballyholland, Loughlin Island, Breda, the losers of tonight's game between Kilcoo and Bryansport. So you've got some big challenges in there, and there could be some tasty ties, because at that stage it becomes knockout football.
You touched on Loughlin Island. They were head down. Patrick, was a fairly close game, just going by the scoreline. So what was the sort of picture there?
Sorry, I said Loughlin Island, the loser pod was down. Patrick lost that game. Loughlin Island probably dominated most of the game. They were the better side throughout. There was a period towards the end of the first half where Patrick maybe got a little purple patch, and in fairness to them, they made the most of it. They got a goal during that. Jerry Collins, just before half time, a person that people who have followed Down over the years might be familiar with. Jared was a long time servant with the county. It was a long ball in. The keeper was coming out. Jared sort of flicked it over his head and into the net. It was a good, well taken goal. And that actually put Downpatrick 4 up at half time, but it was possibly a little bit of a false lead, if you like. And Loughlin Island in the second half were strong. Edward Nixon from centre half back got their first goal. Little bit of controversy around. It was a free kick that dropped in. Defender spilled it. He came in and palmed it in. There were some sort of calls for a square ball, but I think he did maybe move in after the defender had dropped the initial ball from the free kick. And then the second goal, while it was finished by Rory Deegan, it was all about the creativity of Rory Mason. A player with unbelievable talent, really good feet, particularly the left. Fantastic scorer from distance. And he was lining up what looked like it was going to be a shot from around 45 metres. Downpatrick were sort of prepared for that, but rather than shooting, he played an unbelievable disguised pass through to Deegan, who had then acres of space ran through and made no mistake, stuck the ball in the net. And from there, Loughlin Island propelled themselves on. They're another side who have good players. Oisin Savage, county man over the last couple of years, people will be familiar with. Up front, his younger brother James as well. Rory Mason, who I've mentioned, and Stephen Mason. These are all scoring forwards. And when a team has, at club level, as many as 4 potential scoring forwards, then they're always going to be a threat. And over the last couple of seasons, Loughlin Island probably, more than others, have been the closest to that top 3 of Kilcoo, Burn and Carryduff. But for them, it's just about making that extra step and beating one of those teams to really put themselves into the frame as a potential contender in Down.
Does that tell me that Loughlin Island are a fan of the new rules? Is the sort of thing where a team might suit a team? It probably suits a lot of teams, but it sounds as if it's something that will suit them.
Yes and no, because they've had some unbelievably high scoring league games this year where they were beaten.
Okay.
So it's one that's
Two
because
sides of it.
They're quite a big team. So sometimes they get a little bit exposed on the bigger pitches as well. And with the new rules, getting exposed on a bigger pitch is not a good thing. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they go throughout the remainder of the championship. I say they have had some good performances. They were probably the team that put it up to Kilcoo most last year. Kilcoo only beat them by 3 points. I think it was 12-9 that game finished. The previous year they were beaten by Burn 4-10 to 10 points. It was the goals that killed them that day. So they are a side who I think we're all sort of waiting on to get that big win. But it just has to come before you consider them as really a threat to those big 3.
You talked about the big 3. Burn, just looking down to the scorelines, 126 winners over Castlewellan, which is, it just tells me it was a one-sided game, but that's just looking at the scoreline. Is that what it was? Was it just dominance from Burn, or what was the story?
I think it'd be fair to say the scoreline doesn't reflect that at all. It should have been at least 10 points more. It was completely one-sided. In the first after 20 minutes of the game, Burn were leading, I think, 1-0 to 0-1, and they'd hit about 8 or 9 wides during that period as well. They were dominant from start to finish. Now, the only downside, and it's a significant downside for Burn, is that Danny McGill went off injured in that game after 10 minutes with what looked like quite a significant injury. So Burn will be hoping that's not as serious as first thought. But if he happens to be out for the remainder of the championship, a player who was in such good form for Down over the year, then that will be a huge loss to Burn going through the remainder of this championship campaign. So that's probably the one thing that tempered the victory for them. Darren Musson got the goal in that game, a good young player who has a potentially strong future ahead, and again, one that you'll be looking at over the course of the championship to really start to announce himself on the scene. But no, that it was a procession for Byrne from early on. They were completely dominant and thoroughly deserved the winning margin that they managed to finish with.
I think GA fans would want to see Danny McGill back sooner rather than later. He just lit up the year, and I'm sure Conor Laverty, from a Down point of view, of his fingers crossed as well. Kerry Duff, winners over Saul, over double scores. As you say, Kerry Duff are one of those teams that are chipping away at the Kilcoo's heels as well. So was that the same, Pete?
Yeah, similar again. A couple of bright moments for Saul, a couple of 2-pointers. Ronan Connor had a very nice one, but carried off again in the game, far superior, deserving of their victory. Local derby again there as such, and a game that in league football tends to be tight. But Carryduff hadn't got a brilliant league campaign this year. I think people in Down have been waiting on them to really, really go at the championship. And over the last couple of years, they've had moments. I think back to a couple of years ago, they played Kilcoo and Patrick, and they were 4-1 up just before half time and got a man sent off, which allowed Kilcoo back into the game. In the second half, they got 2 more men sent off and they ended up losing the game. That was the one time they've really had Kilcoo on the ropes. Last year, Carryduff played Burn in the championship in the semi-final, and to me, they showed Burn far too much respect. They sat off them. They sat far too deep. So I actually think Carryduff are a team who will benefit from the new rules because it's going to force them to play a little bit more attacking, to keep more of a pivot up there. And again, they're a side who have got threats up there in the likes of James Guinness, Ronan Beattie, if he can stay fit. It's a potentially lethal forward. And they've got guys that can come on, the likes of Jeremy Donaldson, doesn't always start. Cian Clinton, originally a Leitrim player, comes up, really, really good player, potentially big scoring threat for them. And then in midfield, they've got Owen Donnelly, originally from Fermanagh, but I think at one time, I don't think anyone would dispute Owen Donnelly was the leading midfielder in the province of Ulster. So having him around there, yes, there's a few more miles on the clock, but Owen is still a huge leader for them and someone who has the potential to completely change a game, especially now with so many kickouts going along to that middle third.
You chat there about Leitrim, and they would have come up after one intermediate. They were beating the Clonduff 27 points. You always look at these score lines, and you always think if you're racking up that amount of points, you seem to be moving freely. You seem to be having a good running game going. You seem to be attack minded. So, what was the sort of picture from this one?
It's probably an interesting one because normally, if you look at a team having scored 27 points, you think, wow, big spread of scorers. But there were 3 kind of key leading scorers in that. Eamon Brown. Now, Eamon started the league brilliantly. Clonduff won their first 5 games. Brown was in unbelievable form, then travelled to America. So there's always that question mark. Will he rediscover the form when he comes home? Kick not 11. So I think the answer is yes, he rediscovered the form, no problem. Senan Carr kicked 7 points. Now, Senan's a player who would have played under 20 football for Down over the last couple of years. He would generally be deployed around the midfield, but spent more of his time up in the forward line in the game this weekend and was rewarded, as I say, with 7-point haul. Strong player, powerful player, dynamic, pacey, hard to mark, hard to watch. And the evergreen Arthur McConville also landed 5 points as well. So Clonduff of those, again, we talk about 3 or 4 key scoring threats. They are a side that have those. What I would say is with Clonduff, they really need to keep everybody fit. If they do that, then on their day, yes, they're capable of competing with everybody or anybody in Down. But if they lose kind of 1 or 2 or 3 of their starting 15, then possibly more than those other leading contenders, that really affects them.
And 1 point, 17 points, Breda 11. What was it? What was the story here? Was it what was the pattern of the game?
Probably the game that made me look like a complete fool to anyone that I talked about over the last week, because leading into this round 1 fixture, I was telling everyone that is the game to watch. Warren Point Breda will be a really competitive game. It was so pedestrian, so disappointing. Resembled an early season league game in the first half. There was no intensity, no energy. Teams going down the field, almost dawdling through to get a shooting position. Defending teams setting off, not applying any physical pressure, not trying to make any tackles. Was 7-all at half time. Second half, Warren Point picked it up marginally, not massively, but it was enough to put Breda away in the game. They were sort of always Breda within kind of 2 or 3 points, But despite the fact in the new rules that a 2 point, or in some cases even a 7 or 8 point lead, has been shown to be very little, in this game, Warren Point's sort of 2, 3, 4 point lead always seemed comfortable just because of the manner of game it was. It didn't really ever hit championship pace. And I think for Warren Point, the best they'll get out of it is they're into the winner's pot. They know they've still got that backdoor lifeline, but Breda will need to up it significantly over the next 2 weeks if they're to kind of make any kind of stride from the loser's pot forward.
7 games down, 1 to go tonight. It's Kilcoo versus Bryansford. Kilcoo need no introduction as to the level of success and I suppose dominance in the Mourne County. So how do you see this one going? And I was chatting to a few Kilcoo men during the league, and the comment seemed to be that put in a lot of younger players during the league, and it looked as if there was a sort of a change in the guard of sorts. They were trying to blood new players. So what do you sort of expect tonight?
That's something they've done probably consistently over the last number of seasons. They've given a lot of younger players league football, and it maybe takes them 2 or 3 league seasons before they actually get their championship bow. So I'm expecting to see something more akin to what we would consider a traditional Kilcoo lineup tonight from the start. Given the fact that you have the likes of Mayo Bridge in the losing pot, I don't think Kilcoo will want to risk any slip-ups. It is a local derby as well, Kilcoo and Bryansford. The two of them certainly wouldn't have any great love for each other. And 10, 12 years ago, this was kind of 2 of your top 3, 4 teams in Down. Unfortunately, from then, Bryansford have slipped quite away. They've been in Division 2 the last couple of years. They have some quality players, but I just don't see them getting to Kilcoo's level this evening. I think it's a game Kilcoo will win by 6 or 8 points, but I think it's one of those where they'll comfortably manage to win by 6 or 8 points. They've done that traditionally in Down over the last number of years. They don't really extend themselves too far. They get themselves into the lead. If the opposition rally and show any sign of making a comeback, Kilcoo find another kick. And as you mentioned, they've blooded some of those younger players now, and if they want to give them championship experience, this might be an opportunity. The likes of young Barra McAvoy had a brilliant league for them, really, really good player coming through. He's definitely one to watch out for over the next 2 or 3 years, making his real mark at senior level. But they've got so many others who have probably played bits and pieces of championship football over the last few seasons. And then you have to think about the people they've had involved at county level, not just this year, but over the last 3, 4 seasons. And you're starting to think of your names like Ryan McAvoy, Anthony Morgan, Aaron Morgan, Ryan Johnson, Sheelan Johnson. So many players that you can start to pull in there. And I haven't even touched on the likes of your Micheál Rooney's, Keelan Doherty's, who give the team such pace and energy. So do Bryansford get even close to Kilcoo tonight? Unfortunately, I don't see it being a particularly competitive game. I think it's one that Kilcoo could win at a bit of a counter.
I assume Kilcoo are still favourites for the title.
Yes, to me, they are without doubt the favourites for the title. I think the only team in Down, ultimately, that will beat Kilcoo this year will be Kilcoo themselves. And I think it will be a case of maybe a game where they completely underperform or something goes really badly wrong. That's the only way I see them losing a championship game this year, because I still see them ahead of your Burns, ahead of your Carryduffs in that chasing pack. They're going for a record-breaking 7th consecutive Down title. They had a chance at this 7 years ago, and Burn beat them in the final. So to have won 6 in a row, lose 1, and then come back and win another 6, and give yourself that crack again, it tells you all you need to know about the Kilcoo mentality. They're not going to go away easily, and it would be a massive surprise to me if anyone manages to topple them in Down this year.
Pete, thanks a million. We get great reports last year. You were on here at this time summing up the championship. You know the scene very well. Thank you very much for your insight, and all the best, and enjoy tonight's game.
Thanks for having me on, Mal.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So thanks to Pete for that insight into all things Down. You heard from our sponsors, Hastings Hotels. Thanks very much for their support on our podcast this week and every week. Next up, we're into Armagh, the second week of 3 in the group stages, and Sean, we didn't win the house last night, so Jared's a happy camper. We were waiting on the phone call, but sure, we'll have to live in hope somewhere else. So you had a busy weekend yourself, but Group A, by the looks of things, the thing that jumps out at me is obviously Donegal are sitting with no points, and it's not that long ago that they've been tipped to maybe give the thing a shake. So are they in real difficulty?
The Armagh, they're going to Cleavey next weekend, and they need to win to remain in the championship because they've tasted defeat 2 weekends in a row there. And they lost to Mahary the first day out. Probably Mahary winning upset the odds a wee bit, but not a massive, huge surprise. Mahary's a tough place to go, but the Donegal were 10 points up at home to Cullaville on Saturday evening, and home and hose by all accounts look to be well on their way. And Cullaville, who have been really impressive, they've been one of the stories of the championship so far. They come back with a couple of 2-pointers, and Fergal Kieran kicked a huge 2-pointer at the end to win it by 1 point. So that leaves Clans there at the bottom of that group with 0 points at the minute. Cleavey and Mahary are both on 2 points, and Cullaville are top on 4, but obviously Mahary have the head-to-head advantage over Clondigale, so really it's a shootout next weekend between Cleavey and Clans to see who remains in the championship. So it's coming down to the wire, and Cleavey had a brilliant comeback victory as well over the weekend. They beat Mahary 119 to 213. Again, they were 9 points down at half time. Mahary were leading 111 to 5, and whatever has been said by Stephen McDonnell in that dressing room at half time, I don't think we could repeat it here, maybe, Mal, but it worked. It got Cleavey motoring in the second half, and their big players really stood up. Kieran O'Hanlon, obviously on panel, he had a mighty game in the second half. Gareth Murphy has been a youngster that has been earmarked for Armagh the last couple of years. He'd have been a county minor with the likes of Darren McMullen and Washington Kennedy and them. He's maybe a year or two younger, but he's been earmarked as one for the future, and he got his Armagh chance this year, made his debut and his championship debut. So he had a brilliant performance too for Cleavey in the second half, and just dragged themselves back in. They got themselves back level. Fergal Boylan, he kicked a 2-pointer a couple of weeks ago to win the league for them. He kicked a point to put them ahead, and then Shane McGill sent over a 2-point free, which was the icing on top of the cake at the end. So 2 massive victories in that group, Mal, and as I said, it's going right down to the wire. Cullaville take on Mahary. They're at home to Mahary. They'd be the favourites to win it, so they're obviously in pole position to top the group and to advance to the last 8. But the Clans and Cleavey game is going to be incredible because you have Cleavey, the Division 1A league champions, obviously going to be a big hitter in the championship, we all assumed. And Clondigale have reached the last 2 county finals, so one of the top contenders is going to be gone from the championship next weekend, which is probably, it just sums up the craziness of this championship. And Armagh has been incredible so far. It's only 2 weeks old, and there's been so many stories coming out of across the 3 championships, senior, intermediate and junior. And another big story from the weekend was in Group D as well. Carcruppen, I was on here last week talking about Carcruppen getting hammered by Clonerne by 23 points, and this week I'm talking about them beating Armagh Harps by 2 points. They were 10 points down, Mal, and Carcruppen, they're only out from intermediate, and I made the point last week that they secured their senior status during the league, so that was goal 1. But to come from 10 points down away to the Harps, I think Carcruppen were as far out as maybe 18, 20 to 1 during the week. So trying to sum up how big of a victory this is, I just can't maybe put it into words because they were already up against it, having been beat by 23 points in the first round, having to go to Armagh Harps, who won the championship, in maybe 6 or 7 years ago at this stage. To pull off a 10-point comeback to win by 2 points is just an absolute incredible result for Carcruppen. And it means that they can now finish second in the group, which they're not going to finish top, but they can finish second, which gives them a so-called easier playoff. But the playoffs are going to be tasty. And then in that group as well, Clonerne beat Drummond by 6 points, probably closer than expected. But Clonerne are just tipping along nicely. I'm not saying they're going to be saving themselves for the knockout end of the championship, but they know when they have to peak, and they're going to be the heavy favourites for the championship, and possibly heading into Ulster as well. But we'll chat about that when the time comes.
Another good
Group
result
C,
on Crossmaglen and St Peters. I just
yeah,
saw the scoreline that they won by a point.
yeah,
For
that was
people from people tuning in that aren't from Armagh, what was the story here?
Group C, Mal, is St Peters beat Silverbridge in the first round, which was a big win. Crossmaglen then probably one win sees you through to the playoff, or it should. So St Peters, they had no pressure on them. They were at home to Crossmaglen on Friday night. No pressure. It was a chance just to have a real swing at one of the top contenders. And Cross come out of the traps really early. Cian McConville got a goal early on. I think there were 6 or 7 points up maybe. And St Peters come right back into it. Got it back to only a couple of points in it at half time. And again, towards the end of the game, Cross began to pull away. They were 4 points up. Again, Cian McConville on Aaron O'Neill, getting a couple of scores. Rian O'Neill chipped in with a 2-pointer. He come on in the second half as well. But St Peters battled back. They were 4 down, got back to level terms, 115 apiece, and that man Rian O'Neill kicked the winning point in the end. It came from a St Peters chance at the other end. They had a chance to win it, got turned over, and the ball comes back down the field, and Rian O'Neill doesn't make a mistake in front of the post. He didn't need a second opportunity at it. That was his first championship appearance. So obviously with his brother Oisín being out, Ciaran Comusky is out injured as well. Pierce Blessing is out injured. So Rian O'Neill coming back into the fold, the massive addition for Crossmaglen. And it more or less, it's not mathematically confirmed yet, but 2 wins, they're top of the group. They're more than likely going to go through to the quarterfinals, although they take on Silverbridge next weekend. And Silverbridge got their campaign up and running with a win. As I mentioned, they lost to St Peters last week. They were relegated in Division 1A League, so it's been a tough old year for Silverbridge. They changed their management team midway through the season as well. Fergal Reel, who we know from the Louth under-20 team, he has took over, and they beat Graham not 13-18, which again now a poor season for Silverbridge. If they go and beat Cross next week, they actually top the group. So a huge carrot at the end of that game for Silverbridge. While Graham Moore play St Peters.
A free shot for them? Not
Free.
really.
It's not a free shot, Mal, because they can still go out. This is the craziness of the group stages. They can still go out. If they lose and St Peters, and Graham Moore win, then it's going to be St Peters, Silverbridge, and Graham Moore all on 2 points. So that comes down to a mini league. Which means St Peters are currently +3 in it. Silverbridge would be their +1, and they have the upper hand on Graham Moore, obviously, in terms of score difference. But it's going to come down to the last day. It's going to be calculators at the ready. I'm trying to bounce all these numbers off the top of my head, Mal, which Mal's wouldn't be my strong point. But it's going to go down to the wire. It's an incredible group, to be honest. Probably Crossmaglen are going to be the runaway favourites at the start to come out of the group, and that's probably the way they'll end up. But in terms of second, third, and fourth, it's going to go right down to the wire.
Kieran O'Hanlon's Monday Man will be good crack that week.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he makes it all.
The other group, Madden, was it 418, 419? It's a pretty impressive tally.
Yeah, Madden beat the Oaks. Probably expected. The Oaks have had a change of managers too. They were relegated intermediate. The Oaks have a good young team coming through, but it's going to take them like usually happens, it's going to take them a year or two to find their feet, and maybe the intermediate grade is the best chance to do that. Madden, again, one of the favourites for the competition. They were beat by Cullyhonna in the first round, and they come out all guns blazing on Saturday night. They got 2 goals in the first half. Darren McMullen and Aaron McKenna hit the net, and then Joe Sheridan, he scored for them. He got 2-3. He got 2 goals in the second half. So pretty impressive win for Monaghan. One they needed, because the Oaks away was just a potential banana skin. It was expected that Monaghan were going to come out win comfortably, but just a potential banana skin the away day, and having been beaten first round and everything else. So They'll be delighted with that. And the other great game in Group D then was Monaghan and Cullyhanna. They played on Sunday night, and the game was abandoned. There was a bad injury after about 2 or 3 minutes of play, so the game was called off. So we wish the Cullyhanna player all the best, and hopefully he's back on his feet and on the field in no time. Hopefully he makes a speedy recovery. But that game's going to have to be replayed before the weekend, Mal, because obviously they need to work out the final placings. So we'll keep an eye out on that and see when that game's going to be played. But that's going to be a massive game as well, Cullyhanna and Mullabone. So we'll just have to keep our ears to the ground for the minute and see what happens in that group.
I suppose that's the nature of the groups, even though people who are fans of knockout football, they don't really fully appreciate how a group works, that every game ties into the other one. So there's no way you can have that game hanging on. It has to be played.
Yeah, it's nuts because it's just been so competitive this year. Usually, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, Mal, in the last 2 years, sorry, in the group stages in Armagh, it has been fairly one-dimensional. Like as soon as the draw is done, you know who's going to top it and you know who's going to drop out. So it leaves the whole thing a bit stale. Maybe at times there's games being played that you know the winner before the ball's through in. But this year has been really, really good, as summed up in Group A, by the the fact that either Cleavey or Clans are going to go out. You have even like Silverbridge going to Cross next week. If they can upset those odds, now the Cross won't be going out, but there's the possibility that they're going to be in a playoff. Probably the Harps are going to be in a playoff as well. Mahari probably going to be in a playoff. So there's some huge teams that are going to go through the playoffs, and the likes of Cullerville, I mentioned, they were probably the story of the championship so far. A point will do them next week, and they're straight through to our quarterfinals, and then not fear anybody wants to get to the knockout stages. Modern probably going to be in a playoff there as well. So yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant so far. The championship has been as good a championship as there has been over the last couple of years, and we're only in round 2. We haven't even got to the serious stuff yet.
And Sean, across the border in Monaghan, it's week 3 of 5. Their group stages is they've got the 2 groups of 5 teams. So Scottstown were pegged back by Desi Moon's wonder score last week, so they were up against Trua. What was sort of picture now across in the Royal County?
Yeah, Scottstown, that's their first win, as you mentioned. The Drew in the first round. They beat True at the weekend, not 19 to not 17 away to True. Probably not as big a win maybe as expected, but Scottstown will be happy just to get the 2 points on the board, and it leaves them unbeaten after 2 games. That was True's 3rd game, and Cardiff have also played 3 games as well. So Scottstown obviously have a game in hand over Cardiff, who are leading the group at the minute. So they'll be happy enough with how they're going, Mal, and they'll take it step by step. They're obviously the team to beat in Monaghan, and we had Fergal Monaghan on here last week saying about Clontibbert how big of a result it was to get a draw against them, but they still didn't beat them. So it's going to take a lot to see who can actually topple Scottstown. And in that Group 1 phase, as I mentioned, Cardiff were top of the group. They've bounced back from their first round loss to Clontibbert. They've won 2 in a row now, and they had to come back from 7 points down here. They were trailing at half time. Cromartin, who were at home, they were 2-7 to 1-3 up at half time. Cardiff had been earmarked maybe as a team that could possibly challenge against Scottstown. So this would have been a big upset, but they come out in the second half. They got 2 goals from Michael Connolly and Jordan McGarrell, one in each half, which really helped them come back into it. There was a controversial red card for Cromartin's Barry Kerr, which sort of seemed to tip the game in Cardiff's favour, and they ran out comfortable winners in the end. They were 2-16 to 2-10 winners, but they won the final quarter 10 points to 1. So a real second half surge for Cardiff there. As I mentioned, sees them top of the group, but they do have a game in hand over Clontibbert and Scottstown. So there's a lot to be decided in that group yet before we get into the knockouts.
Banty and Rory's halftime team talk, you might not have been able to talk about that one this morning as well. So that was obviously made a big factor in that game. And Martin
Yeah,
Hugh think's involved with them as well, but I think he had his own busy weekend with Kilcar, so it could be an important turnaround for Cardiff, that one.
yeah, it's probably all. It's again the joys of the group stage. The groups in Monaghan are a wee bit different. There's two groups of five, but again, you're away from home. You're coming up against an underdog in Cromartin that maybe feel that they've nothing to lose and they're firing everything at you. It is difficult, and maybe it just takes you a half to find your bearings. And there's a bit of shadow boxing maybe in the first half, and they come out with a powerful second half. Now, Cardiff would have been expected to win this game. Cromartin are a team that, you know, they're on 0 points after 2 games. They're hoping heading into the final couple of games, you know, they can pull off a few results to make it to the knockout stages, or at least get to the playoffs. But Cardiff, yeah, they'll be happy that as I mentioned, they were beat in the first round by Clontibbert. They were beat by 9 points, but they've bounced back now. They beat True and they've beat Cromartin to get the championship up and running. So they'll be probably happy enough with where they sit after 3 games.
And 3 from 3 for Enniskeane in the other group. John McEntee and the gang will be happy with that, you'd imagine. You can't do any better.
Yeah, I interviewed John McEntee for a piece in the Gaelic Life last week, and he was happy that, you know, they'd won the first 2 rounds. They'd beat Ballybay and Armagh, but he was sort of making the point that they hadn't played the 2 big teams yet in Monaghan and Latin. So Monaghan, who come up, they won the Intermediate Championship last year. They've reached the Division 1 League final, which is usually played after the championship. They play Scottstown in that. But this was going to be the big one. John McDay also made the point of home advantage in Monaghan because it's nearly such a level playing field, and Enniskeane is such a good place to play football. He says it doesn't really have a massive advantage for them, but it obviously carried a bit of an advantage at the weekend, and they won 113-9. Kieran McNulty was the star of the show. He got 1-2. Kieran McNulty, we know, has got a few minutes under his belt for Monaghan recently, so he was the big man for Enniskeane, and it leaves them in pole position now. They were in the county final a couple of years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. They lost to Scottstown, but it leaves them in pole position now to push on and get a place in the last 4. They have Latin to play, which is going to be their last game. Now Latin have a game in hand. They've won 2 of their games, 2 out of 2. Enniskeane's 3 out of 3, so it's still possible Latin can top that group. So again, there's a lot to play for. And Ballybay beating Armagh was one of the results of the weekend too, Mal, in that group too, and it leaves Ballybay with a brilliant chance of qualifying to the knockout stages. They haven't had a good year. I know Fergal was talking about them last week and just decimated with injuries and different stuff. They had a poor league campaign, and it's a huge win for them to get one over Armagh, not 19 to not 14. And as I say, it means that they can maybe push on now and get their playoff. And if some of their injury concerns and stuff clear up, then we don't know where Ballybay could end up.
And we will shoot across into Donegal now, where I suppose the story of the day was Dunloe. They were 12 points to 10 winners over Glenswilly in the Glen. But I suppose first of all, Dunloe and Gweedore they have 6 points from 3 games. McCool's have 5 points, and then unfortunately at the bottom, St Knowles, Ballyshannon and Glenfin have yet to win. A quick run at the draw for round 4. St Knowles, Downings, Neve Connell play St Michael's, Kilcar versus Glenswilly, McCool's against Gweedore, which is probably the tie of that round, Glenfin against Ardra, Ballyshannon versus Killybegs, Termon against St Eunan's, and Dunloe against Four Masters. And there was also a game off at the weekend, Neve Connell and Downings off. There was a death in the Downings club, and our thoughts go with the club and the community down there. And as I say, that game was off. Dunloe, to go to Glenswilly, Glenswilly had a decent league campaign themselves. Michael Murphy has yet to pull on the boots for Gary McDade's side so far. Luke Clerkin with 5 points for the winners. Keelan Dunleavy, 5 points for Glenswilly. I think they went something like 20 minutes without a score, and maybe that figure is not totally accurate, but roughly something like that. So they were obviously, that's the way that game panned out. And Dunloe 3 from 3, they were in the final last year, so a wee bit like Enniskeane, you know, they're bound to be happy in the camp. Gweedore 17, Ballyshannon 14 points. Darragh Wheel's first start, and it's hardly surprising he kicks a 2-pointer. Oran McNeilis with a 2-pointer as well. Ethan Harkin has been on fire for them. He has got 6 points to his name. Diarmuid McInerney, 7 points for Ballyshannon, who find themselves in the relegation battle. And as Ronan McNeilis has said to me on a couple of occasions, they wanted to finish in the top 4 because they haven't done it under his tenure. So they still, as I say, they have to play McCool's. So we'll have to see what way that pans out. McCool's 22 points to 22 points to 113 winners over Ardra. Oisin Gallen, some people may have heard of him, 110. He scored. Kevin McCormick with 1-5. CJ Malloy with 1-3. So McCool's definitely in good form under Gary Wilson. And they had a difficult enough start to the league in Donegal, but I suppose when you're playing a lot of league without one of the county's leading forwards, one of the country's leading forwards, it leaves it a very difficult proposition. Kilcar, Pete was talking about playing with a man less. They actually were without Kieran McGinley for 10 minutes of this game and actually seemed to excel during that 10 minutes. They got off to a really good start against Killybegs in Fintra, away from home, derby game. They were leading 1-8 to 7 points at half time. Stephen McBrearty with a goal. There was no Patrick McBrearty this time. Not sure if he's injured. Not too sure on that one. But they had Ryan McHugh back. He come on, had 4 points to his name. Christopher Mulligan, Charlie Breslin with the goals for Killybegs. So getting Ryan McHugh back is definitely a plus point. And they finished the league tricky enough. They needed sort of late results to stay up. And they bounced back like last week. They lost to Downings. I think it was. And there's so many games goes on, you're trying to keep track of it. So that was a big turnaround for them in their side of things. St Eunan's 115 to 14 points win over St Knowles, who are in a relegation battle. Pater Mogan, 5 points for the men from Mount Charles. We saw Shane O'Donnell come on with a few minutes to go. So their county contingent are all back now. Keelan Ward started. I think that was his first game for St Eunan's in the championship. So he's back. Conor O'Donnell Jr. 1-6 and Owen Winston with a handful of points as well. And Barry Meehan say they are on 6 points. So they're the champions, and they're at the upper side of the table where you want to be. For Masters, 20 points to 111 winners over Glenfin. Ciaran McGlynn hit a late goal for Glenfin, but again, for Masters, obviously the team a lot of us have been looking out for because of their underage progression. They're now on 4 points, but they had a good spread of scorers, and it's the names that have rattled off the tongue at underage level: Turlock Carr, Conor McCall, Kevin Muldoon. So an exciting team, but again, all these exciting teams are very good. It's until you make the breakthrough into the top bracket, and Pete was talking about the same thing in Down. And the other game, St Michael's 14 points to 1-7 winners over Termon. And Termon going to find themselves in a wee bit of trouble. They were league champions, but they've only 2 points on the board. But that game was away from home in the Bridge, where St Michael's, Daniel McLaughlin, Carlos O'Reilly, always their leading lights. And again, they were the men on the score sheet, Michael Langan as well. But Darren McDade scored 4 points for Termon. But as I say, after winning the league and after getting a good win last week, it's a wee bit up and down for them. And who do they play in the last game? They play St Eunan's. So a derby game there at the end. And they're sitting with 2 points. So that's another crunch game. And the way it works in Donegal is you have 16 teams. The top 8 after 4 games go into the quarterfinals. The top 4 goes into the quarterfinals. The next 8 they play off to see who gets in there, and the bottom 4, unfortunately, they're in the relegation battle. So that's the sort of the summary in Donegal. But as we say every week, as it goes on, it thickens up, and no more than it was in Armagh. This is quite similar, 1 round to go. But with obviously that unplayed Downings game, it's next weekend because they have a free weekend, like a catch-up weekend. And there's 3 hurling finals, and then in 2 weeks' time we'll be on here to find out what way the table actually finished up.
Yeah, well, it's all very exciting, isn't it? Even in Donegal, there you're talking about teams that their season hangs in the balance. You're maybe talking about a team on the verge of relegation, but 1 win and can climb up the table. Like it's the championship seem to be really exciting across the board, and maybe for club enthusiasts like ourselves, this is our favourite time of year, and we're just enjoying it as it goes along.
Aye, it is, and you know, every club championship's got a different format, you know, and Derry they've changed the back door again this year the way it is in Down currently. But just if you even look at the fact that Termon are league champions and they're going to have to play St Unions in a crunch game, and like you're chatting about Clevie, they won the league. Then didn't they lose last week? Didn't they, Sean?
Yeah, they lost.
And then they found themselves in the hole at half time, you know, so there's all sorts of emotions. And like you're saying, Stevie McDonald and the management team at half time, you know, you have to work some sort of a miracle to turn things around. So there's loads of stories on it, like even in Derry in the hurling championship at the weekend there, Ballinascreen had a brilliant one over Swatter just with the last 5 minutes was 3 goals or something. So every championship has some sort of a story. Like I'm going to be doing a feature on Kingscourt this week and their team way back in the 90s, and they have their own story to tell about getting the 2 Ulster finals, losing one they should have won against Burn. So it's a different generation, it's a different year, but the story is still the same. You wake up on a Monday morning and we're doing what we're doing right now. We're talking away about football and who should have won and who could have won and all the rest. So nothing changes.
Stuff. We're loving it. We haven't even got to the knockout stages yet, so we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Mal, thanks for coming on this morning. Thanks to Pete McGrath Jr. as well for giving us the down roundup in the opening round of that championship. And we'll be back on Thursday. We'll have another podcast and then another review show coming up next Monday as well. So we'll chat to everybody then. Thanks, Mal.
Thanks, Sean.